was just 16 years old. He knew how to enter the deadliest battle formation ever designed, but not how to come out. This is the story of Abhimanyu, and it is one of the most heartbreaking stories in the entire Mahabharata. To understand why Abhimanyu's death shook the heavens, you need to understand who he was. Abhimanyu was not just any warrior. He was the son of Arjuna, the greatest archer who ever lived. His mother was Subhadra, Krishna's own sister. So Abhimanyu had the blood of warriors flowing from one side and the blood of the divine flowing from the other. He was born extraordinary. But the story of Abhimanyu's destiny begins even before his birth. It begins in the womb. According to the Mahabharata, when Subhadra was pregnant with Abhimanyu, Arjuna was telling her about various military formations and strategies. One evening he began explaining the Chakravyuha, the most complex and deadly battle formation in ancient warfare. The Chakravyuha is a multi-layered circular formation that rotates like a wheel. Warriors are arranged in concentric circles, each circle more dangerous than the last. Once an enemy enters, the circles close behind them like a trap. Getting in requires immense skill. Getting out requires a completely different set of skills. And the warriors inside the formation are constantly moving, making it almost impossible to fight your way through. Arjuna was explaining to Subhadra how to enter the Chakravyuha. He described each layer, each opening, each maneuver needed to penetrate the outer rings and push toward the center. But as he was about to explain how to break out of the formation, how to exit safely after entering, he noticed that Subhadra had fallen asleep, but the baby in her womb had not. Abhimanyu, still unborn, had listened to every word about entering the Chakravyuha. He absorbed the knowledge. It became part of him. But the lesson on how to exit, that part he never received. This incomplete knowledge would become Abhimanyu's fate. Abhimanyu grew up to be everything his parents could have hoped for. He was handsome, brave, skilled in all forms of warfare, and deeply loved by everyone. He trained under his father Arjuna, his uncle Krishna, and the other Pandava warriors. By the time he was a teenager, he was already considered one of the finest warriors of his generation. He married Uttara, the princess of the Matsya kingdom. Their love story was brief but genuine. They were young, happy, and had their whole lives ahead of them, or so they thought. Then came the Mahabharata war. The Pandavas and the Kauravas met on the battlefield of Kurukshetra for 18 days of devastating combat. Abhimanyu fought from the first day, and he fought with a ferocity that stunned both sides. Seasoned warriors who had fought for decades watched this 16-year-old boy cut through their ranks like a blade through grass. He was fearless, he was relentless, he was his father's son. But the 13th day of the war changed everything. On the 13th day, the Kaurava commander Dronacharya, who was also Arjuna's teacher, devised a plan to capture King Yudhishthira alive. He arranged his forces in the Chakravyuha formation, knowing that only two warriors on the Pandava side knew how to break it, Arjuna and Krishna. But Drona was clever. He made sure Arjuna was drawn away from the main battlefield. The Samsaptakas, a group of warriors who had taken an oath to either kill Arjuna or die trying, challenged Arjuna to fight in a distant part of the field. Arjuna had no choice but to accept. He and Krishna rode away from the main army, leaving the Pandavas without their only Chakravyuha expert. When the Pandavas saw the Chakravyuha forming in front of them, panic set in. No one knew how to break it. Yudhishthira would be captured. The war could be lost on this single day. And then Abhimanyu stepped forward. He told his uncles, "I know how to enter the Chakravyuha. My father taught me when I was in my mother's womb. I can break through the outer rings and create an opening, but I do not know how to come out. You must follow behind me and keep the path open." The Pandava warriors agreed. Bhima, Yudhishthira, Nakula, Sahadeva, and others promised they would follow Abhimanyu in and protect his retreat. It seemed like a solid plan. Abhimanyu mounted his chariot. He took a deep breath, and then, with a war cry that echoed across the battlefield, he charged straight into the Chakravyuha. What happened next was nothing short of legendary. Abhimanyu smashed through the first ring of warriors like they were made of straw. He broke the second ring, then the third. His arrows flew so fast that they seemed to bend time itself. He fought multiple maharathis, great warrior champions, simultaneously, and held his own against every single one. He defeated Drona's formation guards. He fought Drona himself to a standstill. He wounded Karna, yes, Karna, one of the deadliest warriors in the entire war. He defeated Duryodhana, forced him to retreat, and left Dushasana unconscious. He killed thousands of soldiers. He shattered chariots, killed elephants, and sent the Kaurava army into confusion. The Kauravas could not believe what was happening. A 16-year-old boy was single-handedly dismantling their greatest battle formation from the inside. But here is where the tragedy begins. The Pandava warriors who were supposed to follow Abhimanyu into the Chakravyuha were stopped at the entrance. Jayadratha, the king of Sindhu, used a boon he had received from Lord Shiva to single-handedly hold back all 4 Pandava brothers, everyone except Arjuna. The gateway closed behind Abhimanyu. He was trapped inside the Chakravyuha, alone, with the entire Kaurava army closing in around him. Abhimanyu did not panic. He kept fighting. He kept destroying everything in his path. But the Kauravas had realized that they could not defeat him in fair combat. This boy was too skilled, too brave, too powerful to be beaten one-on-one. So they did the unthinkable. They abandoned the rules of war. In the Dharma of warfare as established by the Mahabharata, there were strict rules. A single warrior should not be attacked by multiple warriors simultaneously. A warrior whose weapons are broken should not be attacked. A warrior who has fallen from his chariot should not be attacked. A warrior who is retreating should not be attacked. These rules were sacred. They were the foundation of righteous warfare. The Kauravas broke every single one of these rules. 7 maharathis, the greatest warriors of the Kaurava side, attacked Abhimanyu simultaneously. Drona, Karna, Ashwatthama, Kripa, Shakuni, Duryodhana, and Dushasana's son, all of them came at one 16-year-old boy at the same time. Even then, Abhimanyu fought back, but they systematically disarmed him. From behind, Karna broke Abhimanyu's bow. This was against every rule of warfare, attacking from behind, destroying a warrior's weapon while he is engaged with another opponent. But they did it. Picked up a sword and shield, they shattered his shield with a barrage of arrows. He grabbed the wheel of his broken chariot and used it as a weapon. Multiple warriors attacked him at once, breaking the mace. Finally, Abhimanyu stood on the battlefield with nothing. No weapon, no armor, no chariot, no protection. He was bleeding from dozens of wounds. He was exhausted. He was completely alone. And still, they did not stop. Dushasana's son came from behind and struck Abhimanyu on the head with a mace. Abhimanyu fell, and then they swarmed him. Multiple warriors attacking a fallen, unarmed, exhausted 16-year-old boy. They beat him until his body could take no more. Abhimanyu died on the 13th day of the Kurukshetra war. He was 16 years old. When the news reached Arjuna that evening, the greatest warrior in the world collapsed. He wept. He screamed. He held his head in his hands and howled with grief that shook the earth. His son, his brilliant, brave, beautiful son, had been murdered by cowards who ganged up on a child because they were too weak to face him alone. And then Arjuna's grief turned to something far more dangerous. It turned to rage. Arjuna took a vow. He swore that before sunset the next day, he would kill Jayadratha, the man who had blocked the Pandavas from entering the Chakravyuha. If he failed, Arjuna would walk into fire and end his own life. The 14th day of the war was shaped entirely by this vow. The Kauravas surrounded Jayadratha with layers upon layers of warriors, and Arjuna, with Krishna by his side, cut through all of them. He was not a warrior on that day. He was the wrath of a father given form. As the sun began to set, Krishna created an illusion of sunset. The Kauravas celebrated, thinking Arjuna had failed. Jayadratha came out of hiding, and in that moment, Arjuna's arrow took his head. But killing Jayadratha did not bring Abhimanyu back. Nothing could. The boy who had learned the Chakravyuha in his mother's womb, who had fought like a lion against impossible odds, who had faced 7 legends simultaneously without flinching, he was gone. There is one final part of this story that gives it meaning beyond the tragedy. When Abhimanyu died, his wife Uttara was pregnant. She carried Abhimanyu's son. That son was Parikshit, who would go on to become the king of the Pandava dynasty after the war. Parikshit was the one to whom the great sage Shukadeva narrated the entire Bhagavata Purana, one of the most important spiritual texts in Hinduism. Through Parikshit, Abhimanyu's legacy shaped the spiritual destiny of an entire civilization. And Abhimanyu's grandson was Janamejaya, who held the great snake sacrifice and to whom the Mahabharata itself was narrated for the first time. So the very story we are telling right now exists because of Abhimanyu's bloodline. The story of Abhimanyu is heartbreaking because it is unfair. He did nothing wrong. He was brave, noble, and selfless. He went into the Chakravyuha, knowing he might not come out because his family needed him. And he was killed by men who could not match him in skill, so they abandoned honor to bring him down through numbers and treachery. But here's the spiritual lesson buried in this tragedy. Abhimanyu knew he was going to his death. He was told he could not escape the formation. And he went anyway. He went because duty called. He went because his family needed him. He went because sometimes doing the right thing means walking into a fight you know you cannot win. Abhimanyu teaches us that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that something else is more important than fear. He teaches us that life is not measured by its length but by its depth. 16 years. That is all he had. But in those 16 years, he lived more fully, fought more bravely, and loved more deeply than most people do in 100. And he teaches us one more thing, the most painful lesson of all. Sometimes the good do not win. Sometimes the brave fall. Sometimes the rules are broken and injustice prevails. But even then the story does not end, because the legacy of a righteous life echoes through time in ways that the person who lived it could never have imagined. Abhimanyu did not live to see his son, but his son carried his light forward. And that light still burns thousands of years later in every heart that hears this story and is moved by it. That is immortality, not of the body, but of the soul.